Okay, I take it this is on air. I'm filming this from inside my apartment. Don't really have any furniture per se. So, yeah. This is not a recording studio. I don't expect the sound quality is going to be all that great. But I did run a test and it seemed reasonable enough for the equipment I have. Now, I am going to be playing some clips of Jeranism's video, the great Umbra Penumbra Conundrum. And I think the video is going to be even worse on that. But hopefully you'll be able to see some of the stuff that I'm responding to and maybe at least hear a little of it. So I'm going to do a screen share and pick an application window, and there, I'm sharing that window. And let's see if I switch back to this. Yes, it looks like it's sharing okay. So I'm going to go ahead first and just play sort of the beginning of this. I'm going to skip past the intro.
The great Umbra Penumbra Conundrum. Looks like I found a pretty large hole in the heliocentric model, but who knows? I could have just flawed understanding, and so I'm going to present it to you, and then you guys can tell me. So either I found something or there's some limb brain excuse for it. We'll see which one. So it looks like it's time for totally.
Okay, I'm gonna pause that, and let's see. I'll switch back to me. So he says, is this not working? Here, cancel that. So he says either he's found something or there's some lame brain excuse. Yeah, that was what prompted me to write my first comment. And here, let's see. I'll switch back to. I should have just left the screen share on. Let me go back to there. Let's see. Where is it? Here. Share. Yeah, it looks like it's sharing okay. Apparently, I've got it paused on a blank screen. But here's actually a comment that I made listing my other comments. And I won't read that right now. I'll go straight to what was my first comment. And I'll work my way through them, because that was just an index to the rest of these. And what happened is apparently, so, I'm able to see all of these. And I have them listed up at the top. It says newest first. By default, it lists by top comment. But apparently other people are not able to see any more than 4 of these comments. It seems that, let's see. Will that keep working? Yeah, apparently that's still working. Okay, I had to dismiss a little window there. But apparently YouTube treated these comments as spam. And I'm going to click read more, and hid most of them. So I'm going to go ahead and read the first of these comments. It says, Jeranism, I paused the video 57 seconds in to write this. After at 42 seconds, you stated that either you found something or there's some lame-brained excuse for it. Why would anyone want to tell you if you've misunderstood something when you just declared anyone who does so lame-brained in advance? Basically, you're saying that if I watch the rest of your video and come to the conclusion that you misunderstood something or lied or made a mistake, that means my brain is not functioning correctly, broken, lame, or in some sense has something wrong with it, which you have determined in advance by the mere condition that I would disagree with you. Okay, I'll continue watching it now, and I will comment either way, if I finish the whole video. But due to the way it started out, I'm not sure I can even stomach that. So we'll see. Okay, well, I did in fact go ahead and then watch the whole video. And I came back with a second comment saying, okay, Jeranism, I watched the entire video. In spite of your apparent attempt at 42 seconds to prevent anyone who might disagree with you from doing so or having anything to say after finding you in error, the answer is that you seem to have misunderstood, and that it's not entirely your fault that you misunderstood. I will explain, but not in this comment. I'm going to watch the video again so that I can write comments about specific points within it and timestamp them to indicate what each comment, I gotta click read more here, to indicate what each comment is in response to. Now, I did go ahead and do that, and here's my first time-stamped one at 30 seconds in. So I'll go ahead and play the video from 30 seconds, or approximately 30 seconds. I'll come back and read that comment. Here, let's see. Well, it's at 50 now. Was it 30, 25,
Penumbra, Conundrum.
28, 29, 30? Here we go.
I found a pretty large hole in the heliocentric model, but who knows? I could have just flawed understanding, and so I'm going to present it to you.
Maybe I might have mislabeled that timestamp. Let me take another look at that. See what that was about. Where was that? 30. 34. 34. No, you didn't find a hole in the heliocentric model. Yeah, it appears to be 30. Well, here, I'll just click on the 30.
Looks like I found a pretty large hole.
Oh, that is what he says. Looks like I found a pretty large hole in the heliocentric model.
I could have just flawed understanding, and so I'm going to present it to you, and then you guys can tell me. So
okay, yeah. So that's right. Okay. So let me go back down here to that comment, and I'll read my response to it. This is probably not the best way to do this video, but I wasn't really planning on doing it this way. So it's sort of scripted and it's sort of not, because the only real script I have is the comments I wrote, which were intended for other people to read them, not for me to read into a video. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I see. Okay. I thought for a moment that the live streaming had stopped because I don't see my camera light, but that's because I'm sharing the screen, I guess. Okay, so I have this one timestamped at 0:30 or 30 seconds. I put no. No, you did not find a hole in the heliocentric model. You did find a hole in many people's explanations of it, but it is their explanations which are flawed and not the model itself. Nor is there likely a flaw in their understanding of the model in spite of their imprecision in explaining it. It's simply easier to talk about things without including details which seem not to directly affect what's being talked about. For example, if you're talking about how many people are in your house, you generally will not take the extra time to go through. You will generally not take the extra time and go through the extra effort to add at this time, as far as I know, since those things can generally be safely assumed from context by anyone with a reasonable understanding of the world we live in and human communication styles. So basically what I'm saying is that people tend not to communicate everything very precisely. Now, I'll click on this next one here, 34.
Trick model, but who knows? I could have just flawed understanding, And so I'm going to present it to you, and then you guys can tell me. So,
okay, so back to my 34 stamped one. Where is that? Here. I put yes. Yes, you have a flawed understanding of both the heliocentric model and of people's often imprecise but generally accurate explanations of the heliocentric model. I'll cover more details in additional time-stamped comments to connect them to the parts of the video they're in reference to. Okay, 42 seconds in.
So either I found something or there's some lame brain excuse for it. We'll see which one. So it looks like it's time for Totally Global. But we're going to be looking at it, and it's going to take three things into account. The moon.
Okay, so the next comment was at 105. Let's see, where was I? Did I read that last one? I don't think I did. Okay, hold on. Scrolling down. Let's see. Yes, no, I haven't read this one yet. Okay, so the one at 42, I put, perhaps you did find something, but if so, you failed to present it here. And yes, there are lame-brained excuses out there for just about everything, but that doesn't have anything to do with whether the things being excused in such ways are true. For example, if someone accidentally knocks a glass of milk over on the table, they might present the excuse that the milk wanted to be on the floor. But that doesn't mean they didn't knock the glass over, nor does it disprove gravity.
That should be really easy to see, so let's get into that example and proof. First up is parallel rays. So science says that the sun rays hit the earth parallel.
Okay, let me have a look here. I'm at 116. Way down here. Okay. Yeah. Okay. 105. Example of what and what proof? What was it he said at 105? Here, let me double check that.
That should be really easy to see, so let's get into that example and proof. First up.
Oh, that was it. Just let's get into that example and proof. Okay, so my comment on that. Again, sorry about having to scroll all this way down because this is a lot of comments. Here. Example and proof. Example of what and what proof. By the way, if that section titled global was meant to be a portmanteau meaning bull about the globe, well done. It's very fitting. Okay, so 110 up to about 117.
First up is parallel rays. So science says that the sun rays hit the earth parallel. And these images that you've seen, I'm sure, before, with what's called crispicular rays.
Okay, he says science says that the rays of the sun hit the earth parallel. No, science doesn't say that. Here, let me read what I wrote in my comment. As soon as I can find it. Here, 110. No, science does not say that the sun's rays hit the earth parallel. Science is the method by which we determine such things. It does not say anything at all. People may say that the sun's rays hit the earth parallel, and they would not be entirely wrong in saying such a thing, but they would be imprecise. And in fact, it makes me cringe when they do so. More precisely, the sun's rays hit the earth from a range of nearly parallel directions, ranging from any point around the outer edge of the visible image of the earth in the sky across that entire visible image as seen from any given point on earth. In addition, the difference in that range of directions is extremely small. Oh, you know what? I just realized I could enlarge the text, And I'll have to scroll back down to find that again, but I might be able to make it so that I can see it more easily, maybe even without my reading glasses, although probably not. And you might be able to see it as well, the text that I'm reading. No, where was I? 110. Here we go. Okay. More precisely, the sun's rays hit the Earth from a range of nearly parallel directions, ranging from any point around the outer edge of the visible image of the sun in the sky across that entire visible image as seen from any given point on Earth. In addition, the difference at that range, the difference in that range of directions is extremely small from one point on the Earth's surface to another across the entire sunlit hemisphere of the Earth. I put hemisphere in quotes because that is what such a shape is commonly called, even though the precise mathematical definition of hemisphere cannot be duplicated exactly by any physical object. Again, such precision is not usually adhered to in ordinary human communication because it is generally assumed that most humans either already understand such things or will figure it out from such imprecise common usage by about the age of 4 years. So let's see. My next one is at 117. Running to the one after that at 125. So here we go.
And these images that you've seen, I'm sure, before with what's called crispicular rays are a strange anomaly because, well, do those lines look parallel to you? Now, a few points about what we are looking at. Remember that they say that the sun is 92 million miles away. It seems this doesn't fit that so well. The excuse is just like the railroad track.
Let me zoom it back out a little bit. There. And I think that will fit a little better. It appears the video didn't quite fit. Let me find that again. Where was I? 117, was it? Yeah, 117 to 125. So I'm going to try that again. Click on 117.
And these images that you've seen, I'm sure, before with what's called crispicular rays are a strange anomaly because, well, do those lines look parallel to you?
Sorry,
points about
that was meant to pause it. Okay, scrolling back down to this 117 comment. There, 117. Those are not crispicular rays, but crepuscular rays. They are also not an anomaly, but rather exactly what anyone with an understanding of vision and geometry would expect to see when looking at nearly parallel lines in a direction which runs mainly from reasonably close to the viewer to many times further away from the viewer. As the visual arc scales inversely with the distance. In other words, at twice as far away, the rays or sunbeams appear half as far apart. At twice as far... Did I type that twice? I did. At twice as far away, the rays of the sunbeam appear half as far apart. At 3 times as far away, the rays of the sunbeams appear 1/3 as far apart. At 100 times away, the rays of the rays or sunbeams appear 1/100th as far apart. If you're looking, that's supposed to be at, not t. If you're looking at 2 approximately parallel rays a mile apart, toward the sun just above the horizon, at their closest points to you, they may well not both fit into your visual field at once. But at 100... What in the world? I typed something wrong here. 105.20 away? Yeah, I typed something wrong here. I'm not sure quite what I had meant. It says they will appear as close together as two. Okay. 520. Where was I? If you're looking at 2 approximately parallel rays a mile apart, At their closest point to you, they may well not fit in. Okay, but at I think I was supposed to be 100 miles away. Yeah, not sure what I did. But my point, the point I was getting at any rate, is that that rays which may be very, very, very far apart visually, close up, as they go off into the distance, get a lot closer together. And yes, they will appear to reach the more or less the vanishing point. I do go into this in further detail in other comments. I wonder whether this is one of the comments that is visible to other people, because it's got some bad errors in it. At any rate, I'm not perfect. Don't claim to be. I'm just doing the best I can here to try to help this guy out, because he really seems to have some difficulty understanding reality. And maybe he's just dishonest, but then again, maybe he actually is having such difficulty, in which case, kind of feel bad for him and want to help him out. So, I can't hold it against somebody if they really do have trouble understanding reality. That's not their fault. We're all different. We all got our advantages and disadvantages. Any rate, so I got about 5 seconds here, roughly at 125.
Do those lines look parallel to you? Now, a few points about what we are looking at.
Okay, do those lines look parallel to you? Yes, actually. They don't look parallel on the screen. They look like parallel lines in the sky out into the distance. Where is that? 125. Here's my response to that. Yes, that is what parallel lines from points near you to points very far from you look like. This is why artists use a technique known as perspective drawing, which involves the use of vanishing points from the perspective of the viewer. However, looking parallel and being parallel are not the same thing. Sure, they're related, and certainly how parallel lines are, in other words, how close to parallel they are, will affect how parallel or how close to parallel they appear to be. But human perception has its limitations, and the sun's rays are close enough to parallel to push those limits. That is why people say the sun's rays are parallel, because for most purposes they are visually. In other words, the sun's rays are not actually parallel from a geometric or mathematic precise perspective, but for the purposes of human perception, yeah, they're parallel. Here, where was I? This one, 130. About 8 seconds or so of the video.
Remember that they say that the sun is 93 million miles away, so the excuse is just like the railroad tracks that meet at our horizon. But
okay, 130. I hope this isn't too terribly hard to follow as I'm doing this scrolling up and down and everything. Okay, my comment on that part. Yes, the sun is well over 90 million miles away from Earth, ranging throughout the year from about 91 million miles to just under 95 million miles. But no, that's not an excuse. Modern standard rail gauge aims for the inner surfaces of the rails to be 1,435 millimeters apart. That's about 4 feet, 8.5 inches. So from the center of the head, that's the top part of the track, of one rail to the center of the head of the other rail is approximately 5 feet. I think it should be obvious that you could not see. Here, I should have. I apparently edited this and didn't edit correctly. I left the word "see" in. That you could not make out such a distance apart at a distance of 90 million miles, nor even at the distance of the sky near the horizon. But just how much distance apart could you make out at such a distance away? Well, let's look at this mathematically, shall we? Ignoring the ground level phenomenon of fog, which is a type of cloud, technically, cloud altitudes generally range from about 6,500 feet to about 23,000 feet. Based on the known curvature of the Earth, this means you should be able to see even the lowest clouds at least 100 miles away if your eye level is at least a foot or so above any nearby obstructions. In other words, if you're looking out over the sea, if your head is at least a foot above the peaks of the waves, if you're looking out over the ground, any hills or whatever in the way right nearby, if your eyes are at least a foot above that level. Of course, hills and mountains at a distance could be quite a bit higher and still not obstruct your view of those clouds. Any rate, continuing my comment. Now, what's the smallest thing you can make out with the naked eye at a mile away? A human being? A football? Something about a foot in diameter, perhaps? That's probably being a bit generous, but I'll go with it. That would mean at 100 miles away, you would barely be able to make out a width of 100 feet. A 100-yard U.S. football field would only be 3 times that practically imperceptible size at that distance. And of course, there are higher altitude clouds up to about 3.5 times the altitude, the shadows of which can split the sun's rays into sunbeams at much greater distances. Are you starting to get the picture yet? That's a question for Jeranism. I doubt he'll answer it, but the question's there. Okay, let's see. 138. Just a few seconds here.
It appears I can see where all the sun rays converge.
Okay, he says it appears you can see where all the sun's rays converge. 138. Yes, it appears you can see where all of the sun's rays in the narrow band of such a cloud formation converge. It appears that way, but in reality, they do not converge at all. That is a visual effect. They are merely farther away at a distance, and therefore visually closer together at a distance, and not actually physically closer. Okay, let's see, 141 to 146, about 5 seconds here.
Converge. Well, let's say, since science does, that sun rays do hit the Earth parallel. Now,
okay, he says, let's say, since science does, the sun's rays do hit the Earth parallel. 141. Again, no. Science does not say that the sun's rays hit the Earth parallel. Some of them do. In other words, some of the sun's rays do hit the Earth parallel. Sure. And the rest of them that get here straight from the sun, as opposed to after reflecting off the moon or some other object, arrive nearly parallel. But science only tells us how to find that out for ourselves. Science doesn't say what we observe. Observation does. Science doesn't say what we can calculate from our observations. Observation-based calculations do. The body of modern scientific knowledge includes records of such observations and calculations, but that's not science saying anything. That's just a record to save us some time and effort so that each and every human being alive doesn't have to individually reproduce each and every scientific experiment or observation known in order to understand the world we live in reasonably well. Yes, you can say that the sun's rays hit the Earth parallel and that would be close enough to an accurate statement for most purposes. But it still makes me cringe because I know there are people, like you apparently, who don't seem to understand that such statements are not generally meant to be mathematically precise enough to use in calculation at scales which are literally of astronomical or microscopic proportions. The distance of the Earth from the Sun and approximately 90 million miles is just such a distance. Distance of the Earth. Okay, yeah, I poorly worded that, but basically I'm saying that approximately 90 million miles that the sun is from the Earth, or the Earth is from the sun, is just such a distance. That is an astronomical distance. When you want precision in calculations with regard to such distances, you need input which is adequately precise. When you look at a diagram which is clearly labeled not to scale, don't expect that kind of precision in the actual proportions represented. Now, I'm not sure if it was right there or where that was, but he did have such a diagram on there at one point in time, somewhere in the video that was actually labeled not to scale. Although I do mention in another comment that such diagrams are not always labeled not to scale, because it's kind of assumed that people are just gonna know that. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Any rate, okay. Find the next one. 141, 146 to 155. So about 9 seconds or so.
Barely. Now, side note on that, the reason I think Aristophanes is a lie is because in 300 BC, a man could not have done what they have ascribed to him. It's just not.
Okay. Where was that? 145, 141, 146. Okay. My comment on 146 is, you think a person is a lie because the person you think is a lie could not have done what they have ascribed to the person you think is a lie? Yeah, I know. That was kind of a lame comment. But what does that even mean? I mean, first off, well, the person that he's naming doesn't seem to be the person that he meant. But, that's a whole other story. At any rate, I'll go ahead with the next comment and just leave that one alone for now. Okay, so 155, just a few seconds of this.
Ascribed to him. It's just not realistic to believe that Aristophanes, 1, knew that the Earth was a ball. We could give him that. That 2, that the sun was
meant to pause it.
Distance.
Okay, 155. Here we go. Okay, yeah, not reasonable to believe. 155. You profess to believe that the Earth is flat, that science talks, that distance away from you brings things physically closer together, and that anyone who disagrees with you has a lame brain. And you want to tell us what's not realistic to believe? LOL. Okay, 157.
Believe that Aristophanes, 1, knew that the Earth was a ball. We could give him that.
Okay. My comment on that. Eratosthenes did not, quote, know that the Earth is a ball, unquote. He calculated based on observations that the Earth is curved, and reasonably accurately calculated from those same observations what size ball the Earth would be if it was in fact a ball. That's not the same thing as knowing it's a ball. Pretty close, but not the same thing. He might well have been reasonably sure the Earth was ball-shaped, but that's not the same as actually knowing. Unlike many people alive these days, he had never seen a photograph of the Earth from space, nor did he have most of the other supporting knowledge that is readily available these days. As a matter of fact, for those watching this who don't know, um, there is a satellite. Well, there's a bunch of things you can get pictures on a regular basis of the Earth from space. But if you want to get one uh, that's not distorted by a wide angle lens, it's a narrow picture, a narrow image of the Earth, as seen from the lit side of the Earth all the time. Being pictures being taken every day. It's not filming. It's not video. But several pictures taken a day. Some of those pictures don't quite make it because the signal's not always easy to pick up. But at least several pictures a day on an average day. The satellite is called Discover, DISCOVR, I think it is. Let's see. If I switch, I wonder, can I open a new tab and make sure I'm getting the spelling of that right? Yes, it will let me do that. DISCOVR. DS. Let's see, that's not quite right. Oh, here, DSCOVR. There's no I. That's why I wanted to double check. Deep Space Climate Observatory. Let's see, Epic. Here we go. And open up that website, and there is a photograph of Earth that is not a photograph put together from smaller photographs, as a lot of photographs are, because the Earth is really big, and it's not easy to get a picture of the whole thing. But this satellite is out there at quite some distance. As a matter of fact, it says here in the description that this photograph was taken from a distance of 989,012 miles from the Earth, and 94,213,746 miles from the Sun. And you might notice that there's a little bit of difference in how well the very edges are lit, and that's because this is slightly off to one side. It's not taken from directly between the Sun and the Earth. It's in one of what's called the Lagrange points, and there's a magnifying glass. You can zoom in, and you can look at part of the image, and you can also switch to different images, and you can also select a different day to view. And let's see if I here, the calendar, August, maybe go back to July, and I don't know, do I need to scroll down? Yeah, I need to scroll down to see the calendar. Let's see what was on July 4th. And there's an image from July 4th. And again, I can go through these images and get a look at different images. And you can see over here on the left is a sort of schematic drawing showing what part of the Earth is being seen at that time. A little easier to make out where the continents are and stuff. For example, you can see Australia is in this image, and if you look at the image on the right, there's Australia. This is as seen from quite a distance, so that is Australia as it is proportionally represented on the globe, and not the way it would look if you were taking a picture from very close up, where Australia can tend to take up maybe as much as half of the image of the visible side of the Earth, because the camera can't see a full 50% of the Earth from real close up. The horizon ends up much closer to the center of the image again, due to the fact that the Earth is roughly spherical in shape. Now, I say roughly. When I say roughly, I don't mean that it's really far off from being a sphere. I rather mean that it's very, very slightly off from being a perfect sphere. It is actually a slightly oblate spheroid, and I know there are people who've picked on Neil deGrasse Tyson to no end over the fact that he called it pear-shaped, but the fact of the matter is there isn't really a label for the exact shape of the Earth mathematically. So pear-shaped was sort of a reference to roughly in what ways the hemispheres differ from each other, not the degrees to which they differ. And if anybody really has a problem with that, well, then look at an Asian pear, which is very close to spherical. But even that is much farther from spherical than the Earth is. As a matter of fact, it's probably your average basketball or soccer ball is not quite as spherical as the Earth is. Any rate, back to the video. So where was I? Okay, so I did this one 57. Let's go to the one at 202.
Given that, the 2, that the sun was at an infinite distance. Okay, we'll give them that.
Okay.
That the rays were parallel.
Yeah, he'll give him that. That the sun was at an infinite distance. He'll give him that. Why is he so anxious? And yeah, I found out the answer later on to this. But why is he so anxious to give in to points that I think he knows are not true? Let's see, where was I? 157, 202. Here we go. Okay, that the sun was at an infinite distance? Seriously? Have you ever used the focus adjustment on a camera? Most of them have the maximum distance labeled as infinity, or I've got the infinity sign there, because it makes no sense to have different focus settings for 1,000 miles away, 1 billion miles away, 1 trillion miles away, a light year away, 1 million light years away, and so on. Likewise, it makes sense to geometrically treat an object which, for all practical purposes, is infinitely far away, as if it is, when doing rough calculations based on observations using the naked eye and imprecise instruments. That does not mean in any sense that Eratosthenes, or Aristophanes, if that's what you really meant, because that's what it sounds like he's saying, actually thought the sun was literally infinitely far away. For the purposes of the calculations he was doing at the time, it would have made no difference within the margin of error whether the sun was 900,000 miles away, 90 million miles away, or an infinite number of miles away. If the sun had been merely a few thousand miles away, that would have messed up his calculations a bit, but not enough to invalidate his experiment or his hypothesis. Okay, 207. Just a bit.
Okay, we'll give him that. That the rays were parallel, even though he saw perpendicular ray.
Yeah. 207. 209. Crepuscular rays again, huh? Obviously, I must have been mistaken about thinking you had meant crepuscular rays, which are a visual effect, and not rays which actually physically converge, as you mistakenly think Eratosthenes or any other person living in the real world would have observed. Yeah, I don't get it, because he really seems to be trying to convince his viewers, apparently, that, or maybe he actually believes this, that the sun's rays actually converge to a point or something. I mean, Yeah, the sun's rays do converge at the sun, but the tiny little bit of them that hit the earth, that reach the earth from the sun, um, they're not really so much converging as the sun as they're diverging toward the sun, because the sun is bigger than the earth. Any rate, yeah, it looks like they converge if you don't understand perspective. Yeah.
But then also that he believed that the sun orbited the earth. See, that's where their whole...
Okay, also he believed that the sun orbited the earth. Yeah, I don't think so. Where is that? Here, 214. Really? You assume Eratosthenes believed that the sun was infinitely far away and orbited the earth? Please do tell where you got these assumptions from. Sure, I'll grant that I don't know of him ever having claimed that the sun didn't orbit around the earth, as the generally accepted model back then suggested, but that model certainly did not include an infinitely distant sun, nor even an extremely distant sun, as Eratosthenes obviously had figured out. So it's safe to say that he did not ascribe to the generally accepted model of the time. In fact, it is from his work and from the work of Euclid that Aristarchus later concluded, after his own observations, that the earth orbited the sun. But of course, one did not have to know that the earth orbited the sun to figure out that the earth rotates with relation to the sun, the moon, the stars, and anything else out there, which makes a whole lot more sense than assuming the earth is stationary and everything in the sky just happens to be in a hurry to travel west, all at almost precisely the same speeds and directions. You may think such nonsense is a given, but I highly doubt anyone who has actually calculated the approximate curvature of the earth from careful measurements of their own observations would make such an assumption. Okay, 218.
See, that's where their whole story falls apart. Because he would have been smart enough.
Okay, that's where their whole story falls apart. 218. Yeah, 218. See, that's where your whole straw man argument is exposed. This is, of course, talking to Jeranism. And falls apart. It's your argument. You made it, not anybody else. You constructed the premise of that argument and projected it as the argument you were arguing against. Of course it falls apart. That's what you constructed it to do. 220. I don't know how long this video is so far. It's pretty long, I'm sure, and it's going to be longer. Sorry about that. Feel free to pause it, stop it, come back to it later if you think it's worth coming back to. But I'm going to continue on with this and try to get it all done in one video if this thing lets me, and see if I get cut off somewhere along the way. Any rate, okay, 220.
He falls apart. Because he would have been smart enough to know that the sun at an infinite distance could not get all the way around the earth in 24 hours.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Not much he said that I actually agree with, but yeah, I do have to agree with that. Where was that? 220. Yep, Eratosthenes certainly would have been smart enough to know that your straw man's hypothetical infinitely distant sun could not have orbited the earth in a finite time and a finite speed. Hence, it can safely be conjectured that the actual Eratosthenes most likely did not believe what your straw man fallacy's version of him well, I have is, but I'm guessing that was meant to say did. I think there was more I was going to type there, or maybe did type and it got lost. At any rate, my point here is that yeah, Jeranism set up a straw man argument. He set up a false version of Eratosthenes, which he doesn't call Eratosthenes, but it's obvious that's who he's meaning to imply, or pretty obvious. But he sets up, I mean, unless he's talking about an ancient Greek playwright. Any rate, this hypothetical, this false version of Eratosthenes, sure, that whoever that is, in fairyland or whatever, might believe all kinds of things, but it's pretty obvious that the actual Eratosthenes did not. That he did not believe that the sun was infinitely far away and somehow orbited the Earth at an infinite speed that somehow equates to 24 hours for a full rotation around the Earth. Well, all the stars out there, which are farther away than the sun, did the same thing. I mean, that doesn't even make a little bit of sense. So, yeah. Okay, 227.
In 24 hours. Yet that's the story we're told, and that's what you have to believe if you're going to believe the story of the sticks in Egypt.
Okay. Sticks in Egypt. Here. Yep, that's the story you told. And that's the story people who believe you would have to fall for in order to believe your version of the, quote, story of the sticks in Egypt, unquote. That pretty well sums up your position, all right. Good job representing your position. You should try being that accurate when representing someone else's. 235.
I hate to tell Carl Sagan, who's supposed to be an observant scientist and truth seeker, who couldn't see the fabrication of Aristophanes right in front of him, that even Stevie Wonder could have seen this one. But
okay, where was that? Here, 235. So when you speak... Oh, that was supposed to say 2. I've got the, but I'll read it as it was intended. So when you speak to Carl Sagan, who's dead, by the way, you feel bad about lying to him? Then maybe you shouldn't do that. He probably can't hear you anyway. He's dead. His work lives on. Fond memories of him are alive and well. Something of what many call his spirit continues to live on in those who have learned from him. But his brain is no more functional at this point than the late French anatomist Pierre-Paul Broca's. And it's unlikely his hearing functions very well without it, especially from the depth of his grave at Lakeview Cemetery in Ithaca, New York. Even if you've dug up his body just to talk to him, which I highly doubt. For those who don't know, the reference to Pierre-Paul Broca is in connection with Carl Sagan's book, Broca's Brain. Very good read. I highly recommend it. Okay, 247.
But now let's move on to the great Umbra, Penumbra, Conundrum. Okay, so we're ready to go.
Where was that? Did I play enough of that? Yes, good idea. Move on. I've got the. This should be to the. Move on to the main topic. Now that you've almost certainly lost most of your audience who had actually been paying attention. Yeah, I've probably lost most of my audience by now as well. But yeah, I mean, it would appear that, I mean, at this point, I was thinking to myself that he was just trying to basically get anybody who's actually paying attention to leave his channel, to leave the video before getting to the actual argument, so they'd never see or hear the actual argument. And it probably did serve that purpose. But I figured out later on that no, what he was actually doing up to that point was setting up a straw man argument for later use, and then trying to distract people from the fact that he had set up that straw man argument for later use. At any rate, I will get to that later on, near the end of my comments, by the way, because my comments only go up to about 5 minutes into his, I think, 11-minute and something video. So, moving on, at 2:57.
Here, and we will remember to go ahead and give them some of their so-called facts. So we're going to say that.
Okay. 2:57. Oh. Oh. Okay. I thought it was 4 minutes. I guess it was 3 minutes. Because that's my next comment. Here, 2:57. So this is what you spent all that time building up that straw man for. I should have seen that coming. Obviously, by their so-called facts, you mean the lies you claimed your straw man believes. So I guess nobody should expect much honesty from you anywhere in this video, huh? Are your other videos generally like that too? Or is this one... Again, it seems part of my comment is gone. So yeah, I don't know what happened with some of my comments. If I hit edit, will the rest of the comments show up? Oh, there it is. So this is what you spent all that time building up that straw man for. I should have seen that coming. Obviously, by their so-called facts, you mean the lies you claimed your straw man believes. So I guess nobody should expect much honesty from you anywhere in this video, huh? Are your other videos generally like that too? Or is this one an exception? That's the rest of the comment I had. For some reason, it's not all showing up here. Interesting that. Maybe I'll just view them all that way for reading purposes and save the possibility of having the end of the text cut off. Okay, 301.
Of their so-called facts. So we're going to say that the light rays do travel parallel and hit the Earth in that parallel.
Okay. Back down to my comment at 301. And I'm going to just click edit so I can make sure I see the whole thing. 301. Sure, you can say that the sun's rays are parallel, but since you claim not to believe that, and it happens not to be entirely accurate, that would be called you lying. Again, the sun's rays at the distance that the Earth is from the sun are nearly parallel, meaning within a degree or so of each other, or basically bordering on the limits of human perception. So it's not dishonest for someone who understands this fact to state it as the sun's rays are parallel. When talking to someone, they can reasonably assume will understand that imprecision is implied in that statement. But you're obviously presenting it as something to be tested for mathematical precision, which you know it will fail, and which you presented as part of a straw man argument for you to then attack as if it were someone else's actual argument. So you're just lying, but obviously trying to be sneaky about it. Okay, 308.
In that parallel fashion. So what you're seeing on the screen now is simply some little examples of that. We zoomed in here, and you can see that those lines are hitting the Earth parallel or perpendicular to the surface.
Okay, scroll up a little bit. 308, here we go. And again, click edit so I can see the whole thing. You claim to be showing examples of your straw man's position that the sun's rays are parallel by zooming in on an illustration. Then you go as far as to claim that the rays indicated in that illustration are shown as perpendicular to the Earth's surface. Well, it is obvious that none of those lines drawn to illustrate the sun's rays in that illustration are even close to perpendicular to the surface of the Earth as depicted in that illustration. Seriously, have you even bothered to think about the concept of honesty? Just a little bit? Even just a little bit? Yeah. The zooming in on an illustration. I mean, seriously, if it was a photograph, I could understand zooming in on the photograph to see if lines in a photograph actually claimed by someone else to be parallel were actually parallel in the photograph. But that's not a photograph. It's an illustration. If somebody drew parallel lines in an illustration, zooming in on the illustration to see that those lines are parallel isn't going to show that the sun's rays are parallel. And if they drew the lines parallel because they looked parallel, or because they thought they were parallel, or because they're supposed to be nearly parallel, zooming in on the illustration still isn't going to tell you anything about any of that. It's an illustration. It's a drawing. That's all it is. Okay, 322.
The surface. And you can do it with a smaller sun too. I'm just pointing that out here. It doesn't have to be bigger than the Earth, or it can be smaller from that perspective. Doesn't matter. We're just showing that light travels across and hits the Earth. Now we're going to look at a solar eclipse. And that's when the moon is in orbit and it blocks the sun, or when it's on the backside of the Earth, and they say that at that time the Earth blocks the light, and then that's why we see a lunar eclipse.
I'm not sure how much of that one I was supposed to show. I think that's about right. Let's see, where was I? Okay, 322. Here you try to convince your audience that the size of the sun does not matter with regard to the subject of your video, the Umbra and Penumbra, which of course is blatantly false. In fact, if the sun were merely a point light source, there would be no Penumbra. But it's not. Size does matter. The sun is millions of miles away, but it is also huge. That fact matters. Your straw man's so-called facts were obviously meant to keep people from noticing when you threw out the actual facts. Well, I noticed anyway. Okay, 350.
So that's the accepted beliefs and the accepted model. But now we're looking at a solar eclipse, and we're going to see exactly how they draw for us the Umbra and the Penumbra.
$3.50. So you speak roughly the first 4 minutes of your video. That was supposed to be you spend. Okay, so you spend roughly the first 4 minutes of your video setting up a straw man argument to present as the accepted beliefs and the accepted model. Accepted by whom, I'm not sure, but yeah, accepted by your straw man, presumably, but I doubt anybody else. Four minutes in.
And the Penumbra. So go ahead and go to any site that shows you how these shadows work with the eclipse or the lunar eclipse, and you'll see lines drawn like this from the top edge there of the sun down meeting with the outer edge of the Earth, and so forth and so on.
Okay. Let's see. Four up this way. Here we go. 4 minutes. Yes. Here, I want to make sure I get this whole thing. 4 minutes. Yes, one can easily run a Google search for Umbra Penumbra illustration and find lots of such not to scale illustrations. They're usually not labeled as not to scale because it seems so blatantly obvious to anyone who's ever looked up in the sky and noticed that the sun and the moon don't take up a huge portion of it, as it would if those illustrations were actually showing actual scale. Is this not obvious to you, or are you just being dishonest again by showing an illustration with lines at about a 30-degree angle, which you just told your audience your straw man believes should be parallel? I really think that's what's going on there, is that, and I could be wrong, but I really think Jeranism honestly understands that when people say the sun's rays are parallel when they hit Earth, that they don't mean precisely parallel. And I'm pretty sure, again, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that he knows, at least whether he believes or not, that the sun is very far from the Earth. I think he knows that that is how the heliocentric model depicts the sun and the Earth, is that they are very, very far from each other. Maybe he just really doesn't have a concept of just how far. Any rate, going on to 417, getting near the end of my comments here.
Earth and so forth and so on, and you have a problem. And does anybody know what that problem is?
Okay, where was I? 417. Did I play enough of that? Whoops, scrolled too far down. 417 to 431. Yep, there's a problem with such illustrations, and you lie to your audience about what that problem is. The problem is, as I pointed out earlier, that these illustrations are not to scale. In fact, they are not even close to scale, because if they were, in order to fit the sun, Earth, and moon all on your screen, here, let me edit so I can see all of this. Where was I? If they were, in order to fit the sun, Earth, and moon all on your screen with proportional distances, let's look at the math, shall we? The distance of the Earth from the sun is about 107.5 times the diameter of the sun. So to fit the sun halfway off the far left side of your screen and the Earth halfway off the far right edge side of your screen, the sun's diameter at that scale would have to be about 107th of the width of your screen. In other words, from the top center of your sun to the bottom center, from the top center of that image of the sun to the bottom center of that image of the sun, along the leftmost edge of your screen, would measure less than 1% of your screen's width at such a scale. The Earth would, I've got typos in here, so I'm trying to read around them. The Earth would have a scale diameter of both in a line from left to right on the screen at proper scales, including, I don't know what happened. Oh, I see. Something went wrong with the editing of this because I had reworded it. Oh, this is just messed up stuff, probably because I had too many tabs open. Any rate, like I said, I've got to read around that stuff. At any rate, at that scale, the Earth would be reduced to less than the height of a pixel. The sun, let's see, maybe 2 or 3 pixels at the highest. Okay, yeah, I think I was working with one scale there, and I changed my mind and went to another, and it seems some of the old stuff is still in there. Don't know why. Any rate, going with the highest resolution monitor that I know of, or television that I know of right now, which is like 8,000 pixels wide. At that scale, the sun would be less than 80 pixels tall. The Earth and Moon would be less than a single pixel tall or wide. The Moon would be about 20 pixels closer to the sun than the Earth during the lunar eclipse. Yeah, sorry. My mind is getting fried by all these errors in here. Okay, the point is, if you wanted to show all three of them on the screen, with the sun on one side, the Earth on the other side, and the moon in between, that moon on again the highest resolution monitor or television I know of, 8,000 pixel wide screen, to get them all on there from left to right, even just half of the Earth, half of the sun, and the moon in between them. The sun would only be about 80 pixels tall, and of course half the sun 40 pixels wide. The Earth would basically be non-existent. I mean, you could leave 1 pixel on the screen representing it, but that's way over representing its size. And the moon is smaller than that, but again, you can't represent on a screen less than 1 pixel. And that moon would only be 20 pixels away from the sun, which on a monitor with that high of a resolution is pretty much imperceptibly. I mean, it would be 2 dots you can barely see with good eyesight or with reading glasses on, at a distance so close to each other that they practically look like the same dot. And on the other side of your screen, a dot smaller than the period in a sentence with small print, representing the sun. So yeah. Any rate, I go on to say any rays drawn from any part of that tiny image of the sun to the pixel representing Earth would converge on a single horizontal line of pixels long before you got anywhere near that tiny little Earth-Moon system. So in such an illustration, while the rays would certainly not be drawn quite parallel over their entire distance, they would most certainly be illustrated as parallel in the area near the Earth and Moon, where they would all in fact be seen as the exact same ray. Because keep in mind, we're talking about an image of the Earth that is smaller than a pixel and therefore displayed as a single pixel, because you can't display less than a pixel. And the rays going from the sun on the left side of the screen to the Earth on the right side of the screen would have to converge into a single horizontal line of pixels in order to be aimed at that single pixel on the right representing the Earth. So how could you not call that parallel in an illustration that's to scale? Unless you've got a high enough resolution monitor to be able to see that they're not parallel, and a microscope to look at the image with, or maybe a screen the size of a city block. Even then, I don't think you'd be able to tell that those lines are not quite parallel. At any rate, I was supposed to be reading this, so where was I? So in such an illustration, while the rays would not be drawn quite parallel over the entire distance, they would most certainly be illustrated as parallel in the image near the Earth-Moon, where they would in fact be seen as the exact same ray. Yes, there's a problem with you representing not to scale illustrations as if they are to scale, and arguing against reality from the position of a straw man fallacy. Okay, what have I got left? 3 comments? Yeah. Okay, so 431.
You can see here that these are clearly not parallel rays. Why is it that science can invoke these different phenomena only when needed by these particular scientists?
Yeah, let's address that, shall we? Okay, 431. And get to where I can see all of it. It's called context. Most people do not need every last detail of context explicitly explained to them every single time anything is being explained. If you're studying how to add numbers in the base 10 number system, then your math teacher should not have to repeat the phrase in the base 10 number system as context for every single statement made. Making the statement 3 plus 4 plus 4 equals 11 and writing it as 3 plus 4 plus 4 equals 11. I have 3 plus 4 plus 4 equals 1, 1. Should be sufficient in that context, even though in the in base 4, it would be 3 plus 4 plus 4 equals 23 and written as 3 plus 1, 0 plus 1, 0 equals 2, 3. Likewise, if you're studying base 4, your instructor should eventually reach a point where saying write 3 plus 4 plus 4 and calculate the results will get you to write 3 plus 1, 0 plus 1, 0 equals 2, 3, without the instructor having to say in base 4, since that's the context you're working in. Likewise, don't expect scientists to explain to you what a child in kindergarten should likely understand unless you're actually still in kindergarten or not old enough yet to attend kindergarten. I am truly sorry if your teachers failed you back then, but you have access to the internet. You can learn such things without their help. And if you really are having trouble understanding why scientists don't always give details which most people can correctly assume in a given context, seriously, ask me on Twitter to follow you so you can write me a private message, and I will honestly do my best to catch you up to at least an early grade school education. Okay, 442.
For scientists, are the rays hitting us parallel or are they not? Because now you back yourself into a corner yet again, NASA. You have a choice to make. You can't have both. So which one is it? Is it the lunar eclipses are what we were taught? Or does the sun come in and hit the Earth in parallel rays?
Okay. My response to that. Here. 442. And again, make sure I've got the whole text. No, NASA hasn't backed themselves into a corner. Phone them and ask them whether the rays of the sun hit the Earth precisely parallel. And unless you've got a real dunce on the phone or you messed up the question, they will tell you that no, they are not precisely parallel, but nearly so. Better yet, I'll do it. I'll get them on speakerphone and ask them just to settle this nonsense. Can't do it today because I don't know of a department that's answering their phones this late. Actually, when I wrote that, I hadn't thought about the fact that it was a Saturday, which it still is when I'm doing this, if it hasn't passed midnight. No, actually, now it's Sunday where I am. And I don't know. Let's see. I don't know what I can use for video capture on the computer system I'm using right now. But I'll get it done. Well, I figured that out, obviously, because I am doing a video capture right now. And I'll post a video showing me making the call and asking the question with NASA on speakerphone. I hate to bother them with such nonsense, but as small as their budget is, they are a tax-funded government agency. So I think I can justify this as a service to mentally underprivileged members of society like you, Jeranism. Feel sorry for you. And again, if you're just lying to people well, then I'm wasting my time and you're wasting my time. But if you really are that stupid and or that ignorant, I can't hold that against you. That's, well, the stupid isn't your fault. The ignorant, you could probably do something about. But if you're too stupid to do something about the ignorant without some serious help, hey, I'm willing to help. At any rate, so the only other comment left was the last one I posted on there, which was when I wrote making a list of the others and links to them, and that didn't show up for anyone but me, apparently. I'll go ahead and read it just to complete the context of this video. Says, if you want to keep people from hiding the truth, please upvote this comment, which obviously nobody can. Here's why. Since YouTube seems to list so-called top comments first by default, scattering my sequence of related comments, I'm making this comment with a list of URL links to them. Didn't work. Those who wish to hide the truth might try to do so by downvoting this comment, which that might be how it ended up being listed as spam. I wouldn't be surprised. So that my other comments can be more easily kept hidden, which they may have well gotten downvoted as well. I mean, after all, this was on a, these were comments on a flat earthers video. Need I say more? Odds are they will succeed. Maybe did. But with the help of people who care about truth and honesty, perhaps not. I'll do my best to include the links to all of them in the set. And if possible, we'll update this comment if I find the list is incomplete. And then I labeled them. The first one as calling out Jeranism. Second one explaining why so many comments. And then each of the time-stamped ones. And at the bottom I put, I've chosen to quit here because I'm not even sure if this whole list will post. And also the comment at number 32 in this list includes me saying that I'll make a video of me phoning NASA to ask them a specific question. And besides, I'm really tired of having to wonder how much of this video is dishonesty and how much of it is honest ignorance or stupidity. I don't mind if it's ignorance or even if it's stupidity, but if it's dishonesty, which seems most likely, then I'm wasting my time. So, don't know if anybody will watch this video, but that is my debunking as far as I've taken it of Jeranism's video that he labeled the Umbra, Penumbra Conundrum, in which he tries to convince his audience that there is a problem with the description of the moon's shadow on the Earth, because illustrations of how that description works show angles greater than the actual angles of the sun's rays on the Earth. And the reason for that being because in these illustrations, they drew the sun, the moon, and the Earth large enough to see, while all fitting on the screen at the same time. I don't know how else to put it, but either there's some real ignorance going on there, or there's some dishonesty going on. Because 93 million miles is a long way. And there is no reasonable way that anyone who's paid attention to reality can honestly think that the sun is only 3,000 miles from the surface of the Earth, or closer to the Earth than that, as many flat Earth believers tend to believe. I mean, some of them think that the Earth and sun, that the sun is as little as 200 miles from the surface of the Earth. That's quite ridiculous. Half of the Earth is lit by the sun at any given time. Half of the Earth. That's, I mean, how else can you put it? People in one place would be seeing the sun far north of them. In another place, they'd be seeing the sun far south of them. In another place, they'd be seeing the sun far east of them. In another place, they'd be seeing the sun far west of them, all at the same time. All 4 compass directions and everywhere in between them. Not to mention everything ranging from straight overhead to way off in the distance, depending on where you happen to be on the lit section of the planet, all at the same time. Really? I mean, how can they even think that works? And what about the idea of a sunrise or a sunset? Okay, I can understand if you think the Earth is floating over the surface, if you think the sun is floating over the surface of the Earth, making a cone of light. Okay, then I can understand how you might think that that cone of light could, reach its edge where you're standing on the Earth's surface, and suddenly you wouldn't see the sun's light anymore. But if the sun is 200 miles up in the sky, or 3,000 miles up in the sky, and staying that high above the surface of a flat Earth, you're not going to see it go behind the horizon. You're not going to see it drop below the horizon. If you're talking about a cone of light coming from a ball or a disc up in the sky, then when you reach the edge of that cone of light, you should see that ball or disc go dark up in the sky, not down at the horizon. Now, whether or not you'd still see the ball or the disc when it's dark, I don't know. Considering that it would then be nighttime, you should still see it, I would think. You see the moon at night. Now, yeah, some of these people think the moon is also projecting a cone of light on the surface. And that's kind of reasonable for them to think if they think that the sun is projecting a cone of light onto the Earth's surface, because how else would the moon get lit if the sun's light is only projected downward toward the Earth and not in any direction that could reach the moon? Unless, of course, the moon maybe went between the sun and the Earth, like during an eclipse, in which case, of course, only the upper side of the moon would be lit, and we wouldn't see that it was lit because we're looking at the lower side of the moon. But yeah, there's just so many holes in the flat Earth concept. No matter which flat Earth model you go with, there are so many holes in it, and the flat earthers don't have one model that they agree on. Sure, some agree on one, some agree on another, some agree on another, some agree on another, some agree on another. There are a bunch of different models out there, and some of them think that the Earth is square. Others think the Earth is round, but not round like a ball, round like a disc. Like old translations of the Bible say, from before they were updated to match reality, so that the Bible didn't look like it was written by people who didn't know any better. So I'm going to let this go for now. And yeah, don't know how long this video has been, but whatever it is, it is. 0 viewers right now. So yeah, nobody, as far as I know, has been watching while I've been recording this. If anybody has, thanks for stopping by. But at any rate, this should be available for view after I've stopped broadcasting once it's finished uploading. And thanks. Leave me some comments. Let me know what you think. And if you'd like me to do maybe some more videos kind of like this, or some other kind of response videos, or anybody who's seen any of my older videos, if there's anything I've done before that you'd like to see more of, maybe let me know, and we'll see how it goes. Thanks.